Hey, I think Trump has a hard time understanding movies. Like yesterday, he played this clip at a rally to show how weak the military is under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris by comparing it to the movie Full Metal Jacket.
You will not laugh. You will not cry. You will learn by the numbers.
Happy Pride. Happy Pride Month. And actually, let's declare it a summer of pride.
So you're a killer? Sir, yes, sir. Let me see your war face.
Those clips are of Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, played by real-life Drill Sergeant R. Lee Ermey, yelling at Marine recruits in order to toughen them up. Basically, Trump is saying with this video that yelling at soldiers makes for an effective military, while transgender soldiers or soldiers in drag makes for a weak military. Now, spoilers ahead, but somebody remind me, what happens to that character later in the movie? Oh yeah, that drill sergeant gets killed by one of the recruits, specifically because of the abusive treatment that you just showed in your video. This movie is meant to show that the dehumanization and abuse of young men by the military is a bad thing, that not only psychologically affects the individual, but creates a cycle of uncontrollable and incomprehensible violence. It is literally one of the most blatantly anti-war films that America has ever produced. So why are you using it as an example of what the military should be? And this isn't the only time that Trump has drastically misunderstood the point of a movie, beyond the casual praise for a late great still alive serial killer. Now, in case you didn't know, I graduated from college with a degree in film studies, so analyzing movies is pretty much the only thing I'm qualified to do. For instance, let's help Trump out with his interpretation of Citizen Kane, the movie that he calls his favorite movie of all time. Here he is talking about it in an interview from 2002.
Citizen Kane was really about accumulation, and at the end of the accumulation, you see what happens, and it's not necessarily all positive. The table getting larger and larger and larger, with he and his wife getting further and further apart. The relationship that he had was not a good one for him.
That's honestly not a terrible analysis of some of the themes of Citizen Kane. I mean, it's a little weird that Trump watched a movie about a man whose massive fortune and celebrity status leaves him isolated from everyone around him, who runs for office and then, upon losing, has his newspaper print that the election was fraudulent and eventually dies alone and longing for the innocence of youth. And then walked away from that movie thinking, I'm making all the right choices in life. But listen to this one last little tidbit that Trump has to say about the movie, when asked if he had any advice for the main character.
You know, if you could give Charles Foster Kane advice, what would you say to him?
Get yourself a different woman.
If you haven't watched the movie, here's a fun little recap. Charles Foster Kane marries Susan, an amateur singer, forces her to become an opera singer, which leads to her public humiliation that he takes part in, continues to force her to be an opera singer, which she does not want to do, until she attempts to take her own life. Susan is a victim of Kane's power and abuse. He uses her as a sort of plaything to suit his own ambitions. He does not suffer from choosing the wrong woman. He imposes his suffering upon everyone around him. Just how can you call something your favorite movie of all time and then interpret the explicit messages of said movie so poorly? And that's not all. In 2020, when some Democratic governors pushed back on Trump's assertion that he retained total authority over the reopening of states during the pandemic, Trump tweeted that Mutiny on the Bounty was one of his favorite movies, and a good mutiny is exciting to watch, especially when the mutineers need so much from the captain. Now, he's referring to either the 1935 or the 1962 version of Mutiny on the Bounty, both of which depict the real-life event during which the crew of the ship the Bounty overthrew their captain. And I'm not sure if he realizes this, but both films make it very clear that this mutiny was justified because of the sheer brutality of the captain. Captain Bligh, who Trump seems to align himself with in this analogy, is the villain. He literally punishes a man to death and then continues punishing him for the sake of it. Once again, how can you be so bad at interpreting a movie that you claim is one of your favorites? Now, you may be sensing a theme here. Not only is Trump just so bad at understanding movies, he's also consistently terrible at understanding that characters with power aren't always good. He seems to idolize the leaders and business magnates that his favorite films depict, but he can't quite grasp the idea that all these characters wield power excessively and abusively. Or he can't understand that that's a bad thing. And sure, at the end of the day, these are just movies. But I don't know, it seems kind of bad to have a guy who really wants to be president so consistently miss the point that unchecked and abusive authority is wrong.